In this video, we will review all the currently available heroes for you in the global version of Lord of Heroes. We put special emphasis on heroes we believe are good investments for free-to-play players. And the first hero in our list is Water Schneider. While both Fire and Earth Schneiders are underwhelming at best, this Water Schneider comes with a surprisingly strong skill set that focuses on dishing out decent damage to enemies and lowering their action gauges. What's even cooler is that a leveled up version of his ultimate attack allows him to activate for the second time after performing it. We believe that Water Schneider deserves to be in the S tier, and his Fire and Earth versions go to A and B tiers respectively. Now, the next hero in our list is Charlotte. The Earth version is your starting healer and a very good choice to proceed with if you don't want to invest 6,000 crystals into unlocking Water Vanessa. She does everything you want a good cleric to do. Her basic attack lowers enemy attack power and her skill will heal target ally, while the leveled up version will also fill the action gauge up to 100%, granting an extra turn. So we're moving Charlotte's Earth version to S tier and her Water version to B tier. Next one on the list, Lucy Lisha. And just like Charlotte, her Earth version is stronger than her Water version. She is a specialist in bringing down single targets, especially big bosses with big health pools. But being a specialist comes with its own costs, making her perform less ideally in farming and Coliseum. Still, she is one of the three lords you're presented with the choice of recruiting, and if you want to have a strong hero that will help you with stronger bosses, she could be your top choice. So we're moving Lucy Lisha Earth version to S tier and her Water version to B tier. Now the next hero on our list is Durahan. All of Durahan's elemental versions' basic attack focuses on locking down enemies, but only Dark Durahan comes out at the top. By having a nearly 100% chance of petrifying his targets, he is a single target damage dealer that also works as a supporting character before unleashing his ultimate and skill. Sadly, his other two versions leave a lot to desire, so we're placing the Dark version of him into the S tier and the other versions of Earth and Fire into B tier. Now this next hero is more exciting because her name is Mei Ling and she has two viable versions. The first one we're taking a look at is the Light Mei Ling, and she is a very fascinating one that acts as a support hero with strong firepower as backup. Her basic attack can heal allies up to 20% upon landing a critical hit, and her skill also grants regen after attacking, which mimics the ultimate attack of her Fire version. This also brings us to the Earth version of Mei Ling. The scariest thing about this Mei Ling is that her ultimate attack can land upon 3 stacks of sap, making it an especially effective attack against group of enemies that have buffs on them. She's also got very good stats and skills that allow her to push through various content. You unlock her Fire version quite early in the game, but there's really nothing good about it, so we're placing respectively her Light and Earth versions in the S tier and her Fire version in the B tier. Next exciting hero on our list is Vanessa. She's got 3 elemental versions, and the first one we're taking a look at is the Water version. Vanessa is a beast when it comes to healing and keeping the team alive. Her basic attack allows her to self-heal, while her skill allows her to give everyone an AoE heal that also grants a leech buff for 2 turns. Most importantly, her skill also gives a significant boost to the burst gauge. To top it off, her ultimate skill revives everyone, and this will prove to be one of the most important skills when facing off against insanely powerful bosses. Even though she costs 6,000 crystals to acquire, she is one of the best choices for any players who are struggling to keep their team alive. Now her Light version also has some notable features, such as giving invincibility buff with her skill, and her basic attack can also reduce enemies' attack power, while her Fire version looks like a budget version of Water, except her leveled up versions of skill will give defense buff, while the ultimate will provide invincibility. Vanessa is one of the best healers in the game, and her Water version goes to the SS tier and her Light and Fire versions go to the S tier. Next one on the list is Lumi. Now her Water version is your go-to answer to keeping enemies from activating too often. version. Her whole skill set is focused on reducing enemies' action gauges, and her leveled up version of the ultimate skill can also put enemies to sleep. Having her in your team will make you feel like the Flash. Enemies won't even get to activate before you will wipe the floor with them. The same couldn't be said to her Earth version. We're moving Water Lumi to SS tier and her inferior version to B tier. Moving on, our next hero in the list is Lyrae. If you ever want to strip your enemies naked of defense, go for this fire version of Lyrae. Both her basic attack and skill focus on making the enemies vulnerable to your incoming attacks, and her ultimate also packs for a nice surprise of reducing action gauges. She is one of the deadliest heroes you could ask for. Now her Earth version is also not too shabby. This is a more of a glass cannon that values critical rating and damage above everything else. She is purely designed to be a killing machine with her basic attack that's boosting her own critical damage and her skill boosting the critical rate. Her ultimate also rewards her for pulling off a critical attack with a powerful attack buff. So we're moving Fire Lyrae to SS tier and the Earth version to S tier. Now the next hero on our list is more of a gentle spirit and her name is Rosanna. Rosanna makes herself very valuable to those who are lacking in ways of boosting their burst gauges. Her skill will put a shield on everyone, and a maxed out version will also boost the burst gauge by quite a lot. She takes her supporting role very seriously and we're moving her to the S tier. It's not easy being Fire Astrid since her other two versions leave a lot to desire. She makes herself to be a very special hero by scaling her damage with speed and also focusing on single target damage. Since you will naturally want to deck her out with speed equipment, she will be one of the first heroes to always activate and will essentially be able to delete one target before the fight starts. Fire Astrid finds herself in the S tier, while the other two versions of Earth and Water go to the A and B tiers respectively. Next one on the list is Helga. Surprisingly, this is the strongest version of Helga and you get to unlock her as part of the mission. We're of course talking about the Water version. She has a nice basic attack that self-heals her, and both her skill and ultimate focus on putting as much of sap debuffs as possible, making her a very scary damage dealer. There's not much to say about her Dark and Fire versions, so we're moving her Water version to the S tier and her other two versions to B tier. Now the next one on the list is Walther. He's a formidable tank that can provoke his targets with his skill. He can also self-increase his own defense with the basic attack, and his ultimate provides an action gauge boost to teammates. All in all, one of the best tanks available currently in the game, and we're placing Walther in the S tier. Now the next hero comes from the enemy empire and his name is Joshua. Joshua is certainly an interesting character. He specializes in stripping enemies from their buffs while also providing extra turns for himself and his allies. He can also remove debuffs from his team with his skill. Overall, a solid choice for those who lack a hero that can grant more activations and deal with buffs and debuffs. On the other hand, his Fire version seems lackluster, at least from our perspective. So we're placing Joshua's Water version in the S tier and his Fire version in the B tier. Now the next hero in the list is Fram, and she's going to be one of your first starting characters. She will definitely help you out a lot during the early game, so even promoting her to 5 or even 6 stars is acceptable if not mandatory. She can stun as well as decrease enemy defense and attack, making her especially important during those more challenging fights. You're going to be spending a lot of time with this formidable hero, so we're placing her in the S tier. Next one up, Olivia. So for her Earth version, you will unlock her after a 7-day login streak. She's a very decent character to use, especially in Coliseum, since her whole kit is designed around slowing down enemies. Lacking any reasonable way of preventing the enemy from activating too often can spell doom in many scenarios, so she is a safe investment for those who haven't got any other alternative heroes like her. In contrast, even though this version of her ends up higher in our tier list, her light version actually costs millions of renown to unlock and performs an entirely different role, if not a more important one. So we'll be moving her free version to the S tier and light and water versions to the A tier. Now a quick lightning round for some of the heroes we won't be covering in detail, but we will be mentioning them. The first two heroes are Mikhail and Johan. Both of them go to the A tier, and Mikhail is actually quite a good choice for those who are lacking a strong dark hero. Next one is Lafayette, which the Earth version seems to be designed for whales or at least veterans of the game, and the Fire version seems a little lackluster, which both respectively go to A tier and B tier. And finally, we have Zyra, and she's going to the B tier. With the lightning round over, our next hero in the list is Aslan. Now this guy is oftentimes mythicized to be a hero of his own tier. Every single thing he does it almost better than anyone else. His basic attack reduces enemy attack power, and his ultimate is designed to be a single target killer that ignores any defenses the target has. But what truly makes him a legendary SS tier hero is his skill. When completely maxed out, it will boost allies' action gauge by 40%, grant increased attack power, and it will also give a decent boost to the burst gauge. Essentially, everyone gets ready for their second activation with their attack boosted and burst gauge ripe and ready. And so, with no surprise, we're moving this legendary mercenary king to the SS tier. Following in his footsteps is another hero, and her name is Nine. So the Nine's Earth version comes packing some deadly firepower, the most prominent of them being the skill. Not only does it lower enemies' action gauge, but it also boosts its own. Having the opportunity to go almost twice every round is probably one of the more powerful things you can do. Now for her water version, that's a completely different story. She's a very powerful tank, and she can also put on a shield on herself to provoke her enemies. She also happens to be a warrior, so she can put on some offensive equipment and keep the enemies engaged with her while also dealing sizable damage. And sadly, her dark version doesn't really stand out with anything else, so we're moving her Earth version to the SS tier, her water version to the S tier, and the dark version to B tier. One of our two last exciting heroes in this list is Chrom. Feeling slow? Chrom comes to the rescue. His water version has a skill which will boost each teammate's action gauge by almost 50%. So with some strategic speed stat manipulation, you can make your whole team activate twice before an enemy is even able to attack. Saving up his skill before any boss fight makes it almost a cakewalk. Now the fire version of Chrom is also an extremely interesting choice for those who favor heroes that require a slight setup for a massive payoff. His skill will grant increased attack, critical hit rate, and damage, as well as activate for an extra turn. Chrom can also gain an extra turn if his ultimate attack kills any enemies. Although he isn't ideal for auto-farming content due to his peculiar nature of comboing attacks, he is a very powerful hero to have when facing off against more challenging enemies or players. Both of his versions go to the SS tier. And the final hero in our list is Aleph. For her fire version, she is one of the most dangerous teammates you could have on your team if they land a critical strike. She is designed to capitalize on critical hits by either self-healing or completely ignoring the enemy defenses. She is especially horrifying in the Coliseum. And for her water version, she is a specialist that shines as a hero destined to slay targets with increased health. As you can imagine, she is probably one of the strongest heroes you can bring to any boss fight. Both her versions go to the SS tier. We hope you found this video useful. Please consider subscribing to our channel and clicking the like button to support us. You can also check out our tier list article on gachagamer.com, link in the description, where we provide even more useful tier list information for Lord of Heroes.